Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Extraordinary Council. Today, Tuesday, the 10th of March, which has been set to deal with our fees and charges and our budget setting. The first item on our agenda are declarations of interest. Do I have any, please? No? Thank you very much. So we'll move straight on to item 2 in part 1. Which is our fees and charges for the period 1st of April to the 31st of March 27, and that's in the hands of our Deputy 151 Officer, Tracy. Good morning, Tracy. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, committee. So the report that you've got in front of you is to set the fees and charges for the 26-27 budget. So appendices A, B, C and D set out the fees and charges, and for registration services we're looking at the fees and charges for 27-28 and 28-29, which is set out in Appendix E for you. The proposed uplift is being set at 5% this year. So whilst that is higher than the rate of inflation that we have at the moment, it reflects the need that we need to help the council right-size income budgets and make sure that services are fully recovering costs to deliver those services. So just as an example for why we've set it at 5%, last year for 25-26, we set fees and charges at the rate of CPI, or the forecast rate of CPI at the time when the budget was set, of 2.6%. However, you'll be aware that CPI has tracked higher than that over this last year. It's been somewhere between 3 and 4% over this last year. Also added to that, pay inflation came through at 3.2%. So that means that the fees and charges for 25-26 haven't been able to fully recover that uplifting costs of delivering those services. So this year we've set it at 5% to kind of catch that up and make sure that we are at that full cost recovery over this next year. Key areas where fees and charges have been uplifted higher than 5% are set out in the report, but just a couple of ones to note. The airport, you'll see that there, whilst a lot of the fees and charges have been set at 5%, we are using 18% for some of them, and that's to ensure that the airport is moving to a full cost recovery basis, which includes all the corporate overheads and the capital financing costs in delivering the services at the airport. But we have noted in there that what this means is an uplift of just below £4 per passenger ticket. Environment services, you had the waste and recycling fee uplifts back in the January full council meeting, which were approved, which in excess of 5%, which was outlined in the report at the time. Environment services have also included an uplift into some of their fees and charges for an administration fee, so that we've got the administrative time in processing those fees and charges are also now covered as part of that full cost recovery. And then the last point to note in there is that adult services, we are proposing a 5% uplift, but we have highlighted in the report that we are going to do some more work across those adult fees and charges, because our initial benchmarking with comparators across the UK are showing that we are a bit of an outlier, and we are charging significantly less for some of our services in there than some of our counterparts. And so we just want to do a fuller review across the cost of delivering those services on the Isles of Scilly and what those fees and charges should be set at to make sure that we are fully recovering the costs. If that is going to result in a further uplift, then we will need to bring that back through to full council, but we will also need to do a consultation and a comprehensive impact assessment across that as well. So that will just take us a bit of time to get that in place, but we're aiming to do that in the first quarter of the year so that we can maximise and make sure that we are covering costs in there. So the uplifts that are in the appendices do also align to the budget report, which is the next item on today's agenda. And they are required to enable budget managers to deliver against those budgets within that budget report, are included as part of those assumptions. The budget report also includes key information from the budget consultation event that needs to be considered alongside this report as well. So that's all I was going to say, and just hand over for any questions.
Thank you very much, Tracy. Councillor Nixon, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Tracy, for all the work that's gone into this. I know, obviously, the work of all the officers as well. I'm very mindful that every increase that we outline in this report will impact on the pockets of the service user and the community as a whole, but it would be financially irresponsible to continue subsidising services to the extent that the council has been doing, and so therefore I'd like to propose all of the recommendations.
Thank you very much indeed. Any further questions for Councillor Sims, please?
I just wanted to speak regarding the airport increase, which is quite a lot over inflation. I mean, I think over the years, and the council's been rather rashly philanthropic with the airport. We've sort of put it up by inflation. We looked at the estimates of what's going to come through, and year on year, it's considerably less than. At the end of the year, we got considerably less income from the airport than we expected, so we've had to subsidise it. I think the figure of about £1 million over the last 4 or 5 years that we put in. Now that's a very regressive tax, really, on the locals who live here. You've got 900 council tax units. Well, that's cost each of those council tax units about 1,100 quid over the course of that time. It's regressive because people who can afford to travel quite a lot reap the benefits of the, if you like, the lower airport charges, but people who can't travel because can't afford it, they're paying for other people's holidays, other people's flights, and I think we've just got to stop doing that because it's not wrong. I remember quite a while back being told that it was illegal for the council to subsidise the airport. Now that clearly isn't the case because we've been doing it for a long time. But, you know, the people of Slough don't subsidise Heathrow, and I don't think the people who live on the island should be subsidising the airport. I mean, private airports, if they don't cover their costs, they stop being airports. And also, it does mention in the report that we've been covering the back office costs for the airport for a considerable period of time. Again, that's, if it was a private airport, it would be covering its own payroll, all the admin. We're doing it. And I think we need to look very seriously at how we set the airport charges for the coming years, because next year we have Selonium 4 coming online. There's a possibility of Artemis coming online. Now, certainly Selonium 4 will come online, and that is going to hit airport numbers considerably. It's a new boat, it's got more capacity, there will be less people going through the airport, and therefore our charges will go down. And the problem we have with the airport, if it is a problem, and we made it a problem really, we know what the airport costs year on year. It's a fixed cost, and the way we price it is variable cost pricing. So if it's a very foggy year, we don't get anywhere near as much money, and if the estimates that the operators are put in go a long way under, we get less money. So what we need to do is to charge the operators what we know it's going to cost us to run the airport, and then they do what they wish to do accordingly. And I also would encourage them to fly more, because if people have got a season ticket for a football team, it actually costs them money not to go to the match. But if you have to pay for it each time, then you could be disincentivised. So I think, and also the actual uplift for passengers is £4, which is broadly speaking a cup of coffee, and that's considerably less than some of the increases that the operators have put in over the years. So I'm very happy to second all these, all the recommendations.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sims. So we have a proposer and seconder for the 3 recommendations around our fees and charges. Sorry, Councillor
apologies,
Peacock.
Robert. I thought my light was on, but for some reason it dropped off. No, it was on, but it dropped off for some reason. Yeah, just echoing, excuse me, echoing what Councillor over there just commented on about the airport. But I think more fundamentally, we have to make sure as an authority that we no longer subsidise the islands, and that we are seen to make sure we cost recover everything wherever we can. I think that's a bit of a red line for me. We can't continue in going on like we have been doing, being a nice council to the community. We have to, money comes in, money goes out. It has to balance from now on. So again, I would, as Steve said, I would second the recommendation.
Thank you very much. I can't see any other lights, so as I say, we have a proposer and a seconder for the 3 recommendations. All those in favour, please. I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the report, Tracy and Russell. So we move now on to item 3 on our agenda, which is our council budget for 2026-27, and council tax setting for 26-27, and our medium-term financial plan for 26 to 29. And this is in the hands of Russell, our CEO and 151 officer. Thank you, Russell.
Thank you, Chair. Today in front of you, members, is, as the Chair just read out, the report to cover our financial budget for next year and our financial plans for the next 3 years. The report includes our revenue budget for next year. It includes our indicative revenue budgets for 2027-28 and 28-29. It updates and asks for approval for the capital programme. It includes the council tax requirements and the statutory council tax provisions so that we can raise the council tax bills and collect the council tax for ourselves and the police. It also includes the capital strategy and the treasury management strategy. These are two documents that we have to include and get approved on an annual basis as part of our statutory process. Now, this year, as members are aware, it's quite a different budget setting process we've been through. Firstly, we had the fairer funding review during last summer, running into the autumn, where the government reviewed the way that they funded local government across the piece. And we've also had our own challenges on Ireland with increasing costs on adult social care, a reduction in our council tax base, and we are currently carrying a deficit on our council tax and business rate collection funds. The fact that the settlement wasn't to the level that we were originally anticipating, and those budget pressures means that we have a deficit forecast at the moment, or we did have a deficit forecast in the region of £800,000 for 26-27. Obviously, by law, we must set a balanced budget, and to do that, we then had to apply to the government for exceptional financial support. The government have, from the 3rd of March, accepted that application and approved it in principle, which we've now had a letter from the Secretary of State for Housing to confirm that. This support isn't additional grant, unfortunately. It comes in the form of a capitalisation directive, which allows us to capitalise revenue expenditure. In normal run of events, we are not allowed to capitalise revenue expenditure. This is a one-off process to enable us to do that, to get over a financial challenge that we've got, which we cannot meet from other sources. With that EFS, that does allow us today to be able to propose and put in front of you a balanced budget, a lawful budget, and allows us to move forward into next financial year, albeit with quite a challenging savings plan, and I'll get to that in a minute. If we do not set a balanced budget today, and we are at a very late date in the timetable, the statutory timetable, there is the potential of a significant loss to the council in terms of it will not be able to collect council tax next year for ourselves or the police. That's a significant sum. You'll see that's 2.4 million in the account, in the budget. We'll obviously risk statutory intervention by the government, and the Section 151 officer, myself, would be having to issue a Section 114 notice, which is will be very destabilising on the council moving forward, not just on our services, but it will have a negative impact on our suppliers and all the people that do business with the council. The exceptional financial support allows us to set that budget and not go into that territory, although, as I said, it needs to be borne in mind that it's a temporary measure. It gets us through the next 12 months. You'll see here that if we get the savings delivered during that period, it will enable us to move into the second and third years with a chance of delivering balanced budgets for the years 2 and 3 as well. And very clear, the government have made it very clear that EFS is only available once all the local options, you've explored all the local options and you've driven out all the savings that you possibly can. I think this budget does that within the proposals here today, and some of the areas that were mentioned earlier in the fees and charges lead into that in terms of ensuring that we have full cost recovery. If we didn't have full cost recovery on some areas, particularly like the airport, I think there would be a very big challenge from the government of why we're subsidising an airport when we have insufficient money for key statutory services for the residents on the island. As we go through, you'll see that in addition to the EFS for balancing the budget for 26-27, we also had an additional application for funding the current year overspend. As we set out in the Q3 report at the last meeting, that overspend is forecast to be £1.2 million. That would take a significant chunk out of our general fund reserve and would probably leave us with reserves that would not be at a level or an acceptable level to support the council going forward, particularly with the size of the savings plans that we have got for the next 2 or 3 years. We do need a healthy general fund reserve. So by applying for the exceptional financial support for that area as well, and that year, it allows us to maintain our general fund reserve at a level which is acceptable and will help us deliver a balanced budget over the next 12 months. As I said, the fairer funding review is probably slightly disappointing. We've done a lot of work on that over the years, not just in the last 12 months, but over 2 or 3 years with the government to try and get our challenges understood in central government. We still seem to be unable to get them to understand that. As we know, we've received no funding uplifts in terms of being remote and accessibility challenges. In the previous settlement that was some 12 years ago, we didn't have any of the remoteness uplifts then either, or the rural uplifts or the sparsity uplifts, because their data sets for some reason or other don't define us as meeting the requirements. We thought that with the work we've done we may have got that point across to them, but again it seems to be not fully understood as of yet. In addition, in the way that the government calculate what they think our total resources are which we have available, the way that they calculate the level of council tax that we possibly can raise over the next 2 or 3 years is also significantly flawed. They've assumed that growth will be available in the council tax over the next 2 to 3 years to the sum of around an extra 200 houses. We all know that that is not going to happen and not going to be deliverable. What they've done is take the uplift, the one-off uplift that we had last year from second homes, and assuming that you can continually get 100 houses extra into your council tax base every year. Unfortunately, that is not feasible. Therefore, there is a significant difference between what the government think our total available resources are and the resources that we have, and that's set out in the report and equates to a sum of about 400 and just under £500,000. If we had that in the settlement from the government, we would have a significantly different picture for you today. The other big areas we've picked out and they're set out in the report is that the adult social care position has got steadily worse over the last 3 years, and despite a significant number of reports and challenges put in place, it seems it's continuing to grow. We now have a savings plan in place that really does target the key lines of inquiry that are needed to bring that service back within the allocated budget, but it will come with risk and it is going to be difficult, and I'll set that out later in the report. Now, if you carry on through the report, and I'm not going to go through it verbatim, although it's quite a lengthy report, you'll see that we have linkages through to how it links through to the existing corporate plan. The new corporate plan is coming. We know that will be coming later this year. We will then revise our medium-term financial plan going forward in future years about how that then links into the new corporate plan. At the moment, it is linking through to the existing corporate plan, which runs until March this year. The resources are all set out for you in section 2. You'll see that in total, our total uplift in resources for the year is 2.3%. A significant hit, as I said, on the collection fund. Council tax not at the level that we anticipated. The anticipated level that the government think we would get to, and you can work out that 2.3%. That is well a full 1% below inflation. So we're immediately on the back foot before we have our budget pressures. So we've had insignificant increase in resources to fund inflation, let alone the budget pressures. That then drives forward the position that we're in. It's interesting that when you look at the various tables which are set out in section 2, in the format that the government use, it clearly identifies that the government think that we've had an uplift over the 3 years in the region of 15.1%. against a national average of 15.5, although that is still under the unitary average of 17.6. In reality, there is an adjusted table in there that shows what it is with the correct level of council tax. You'll see that actually our increase over that period is only 11% compared with the 17% that is being seen as the average for unitary authorities. And we need to take into account unitary authorities because we are, although we're not technically a unitary authority, the services we deliver are consistent with a unitary authority. And the uplifts in unitary authorities allow for the changes in adult and children services and expenditure therein. So, you know, if we had that extra 480,000 and we didn't have a deficit on the collection fund, we'd be 680,000 better off, and we wouldn't be having to apply for the exceptional funding support. But unfortunately that isn't the case, and we've had to apply, and as I say, we've been granted the in principle decision. Going through the resources set out in the resources section, I think the one point I would put across all these tables is that the Fairer Funding Review has done a significant reset. Therefore, the comparisons with previous years are not as simple as they have been in the past. It has been a reset, a simplification in some instances, and a change in the way that the business rates and the various funding streams that arise from the business rates resources that the government have flow means that, as I said, it's quite a significantly different way of allocating the money out as it compared with previous years. That makes some of the comparisons year on year difficult. But you will see that moving on into the business rates, our business rates have actually gone down. The amount that we retain for business rates has gone down over the years. One of the elements there is that the growth that we've had in the business rates over the last 10 years or so, the government have reset that as part of the Fairer Funding Review. So that's been, again, another detrimental impact, not as significant as some of the other areas, but again, it's just another chipping away at the total resources that we have available. Council tax, as I've said previously, you'll see there in section 2.7 that the tax base is actually gone down, the collectible tax base. It's gone down from 1,432.9 to 1,392.2. The government are expecting that to have gone up significantly. It's gone down. That therefore gives us less council tax resources and gives us the deficit in year on the collection fund. In terms of setting our council tax today, the government have provided in the local government settlement the rules around council tax increases. They have set a cap of 5%, 3% for general expenditure, 2% for adult social care. This budget is based upon taking a 4.99% increase, just a fraction under the 5, and that is done just for to be 100% safe with roundings, etc. Because if we had a budget that was 5.001 or something, it could be deemed to be an illegal budget. So just to be safe, we do 4.99%, just so that we don't end up with a potential challenge. You'll see set out in this section that our council tax is still a very low figure for the council tax for the council of the Isles of Scilly, just literally our own element of it, not included of the police or any town and parish councils. There's several graphs there that show that we are very low in comparison to the southwest, and even nationally we are well to the right hand side of the graph. That will be an issue that we may have to think about and discuss as we go forward. We have a significantly lower council tax base than the next nearest town in Cornwall. There are probably reasons for that in terms of how properties are valued, but again, it's something that will need to be thought about as we go forward over the next couple of years. If you compare it with Penzance, with the town and parish council precept, which includes services that we deliver as a council, we're nearly £700 difference on a band D. As I say, there are factors that have to be fed into that, but again, it's just worth bearing in mind that as we're struggling, our council tax is low, which is very helpful for the residents on the island, but it may be one of the issues that's causing us to struggle with the level of expenditure we're now having to incur. And bear in mind that we have been on the journey now where there's been an ever increasing need to bring our services up to national standards, through the various regulations and the regulatory visits that we have now, through from fire to adult care, children's care, etc. We are expected to be doing things at the same standards as the mainland. We need to ensure that we have the same resources as the mainland, either through government or through our own resources where we can. As I said, the collection fund, I'm not going to dwell on that. It's a deficit at the moment. Very briefly, the reasons are that the council tax we're collecting is lower than we anticipated, mainly down to changes in valuations and fewer second homes than we originally anticipated. I think some of the second homes have found alternative ways around the second homes premium. Probably doesn't help that not every council in the country has a significant number of second homes, therefore it hasn't been adopted universally across the country. That does allow people to be a bit more flexible of what is their primary and what is their secondary home. And in addition, there are been challenges in business rates on valuations, which have backlogged at the HMRC's valuation office, which suddenly get all treated and dealt with at a single time, which causes us again a significant financial blip if they are upheld and we have to do refunds, and that has unfortunately occurred during 25-26. As I said earlier, the grants are all set out there and it's for you to read, but the grants have changed significantly, simplified, less grants. We are receiving some of the grants also without conditions now, which was seen as a way of being helpful towards us. And you'll see that there is a move between the main grants and the amount that the government give us as the top-up grant. That is the government's way of mixing between the revenue support grant that comes from government funds, the top-up grant comes from the business rates they collect. On a statutory basis, they must reinvest business rates into local services. So they've changed the way that they operate those two grants going forward. That leads us through to the various levels of funding that we have and the total funding that we have available. And as I say, it's all clearly set out in the report. In terms of expenditure, as I said, we have had a difficult period with adult social care increasing their costs significantly in the last 12 months. That's a trend that has been there for a couple of years. We know that significantly some of it is down to agency and interim staff. More recently, we've seen an increase in some of the complexities of the packages that we're funding, more direct payments and more complex packages that aren't in the care home. And the increase of this is all feeding into a significant budget pressure of over £900,000. We've also seen a reduction in the fees that we are collecting, and again I think there is a piece of work as we set out in the savings plan to try and address this in terms of reviewing the financial assessments and looking at our fees and charges, which Tracy touched upon earlier. Children's services, although we did a big significant reset of the budget last year, we still have a budget pressure there that's developed mainly through the changes in the nursery care provision. The government have decided that they think that the various grants we have from the DFE should have been sufficient to fund that. We are still challenging that, and we'll challenge that into the new year. Additionally, the SEND issue doesn't bypass us either. It's a national issue. Although we have a slightly better relationship with the DFE and how we're funded, we still have a pressure there which isn't fully funded. Our capital financing costs have increased significantly, forecast for next year. One part of that is obviously the potential debt we'll take on from the exceptional financial support. The other part of that is what was pointed out and was in the MTFP for last year, is that at long last we've got to the position where we have to take external borrowing. We've chipped away for a number of years at prudential borrowing, which has increased our need to borrow. We've done that from internal resources. That has saved us a significant sum of money over that period. Unfortunately, because we have now reduced reserves for various reasons, one, to fund overspends, also some of those reserves have now been used in terms of the grant reserves for the purposes that they were originally allocated to us. That has reduced our cash holding, which means that we do have to fall back on external borrowing. We will be looking to do that external borrowing over the next 12 months or so into the years after as well, and we will be looking to ensure that we get the best deals available to the council and probably keep the borrowing short term at the moment to ensure that if the markets continue to reduce, we get the benefits of a reducing market and don't lock ourselves in long term when markets are likely to reduce. Set out in the report is the budget pressures and growth. Again, I'll take the table as read. You'll see the significant element are the areas I've already just mentioned, and we move through the. In terms of how do we address that, we have quite an aggressive savings plan, albeit it isn't enough on its own to balance the budget. But there's £1.2 million worth of savings set in the savings plan there, significant element around the adult social care services, and trying to ensure that we get further funding from government for some of the DFE stuff which I've mentioned earlier. But we still need, as I said, to set the balanced budget, and that has ensured that we have to apply for the EFS. We also set out the savings plans in more detail in terms of section 3.1, 3.11, in terms of what I think is the deliverability. You'll see there's a lot of amber and red on there. That reflects the challenge we've got. To try and mitigate that, we are going to hold a contingency budget going forward for the year. So there are a number of ways that you can approach this. You can reduce the savings plans by a figure because of the risk, or you can keep the savings plans at that level, but then mitigate by holding a contingency, which I think is the better approach, I think, for us in our position at the moment. One of the reasons is if you assume that you've got a saving of, say, £100,000, you assume that it's amber and you're only going to deliver, say, 75% of that, and you drop it to 75,000 and then you under-deliver on that, you could be down at sort of 60,000. Keeping it at 100,000 is going to keep the pressure on to deliver. We have a number of specific projects, but they have reduced because they've moved through to the capital side, and we've got a summary revenue budget proposal set in section 5, which clearly sets out the budget, how it's funded, the level of resources we've got, and the need for the capitalisation order. You'll also see that we've got a measure of the council reserves there, forecast forward. At the moment, the general fund reserve, on the basis of getting the capitalisation directive in principle for the current year, assumes that the reserve stays at that 1.8 million and we don't draw significantly on it. but obviously reserves are reduced from previous years, and if we do have to use a general fund reserve, we will be going down below a level that both myself and the external auditors will probably challenge. That is set out in table 16, where if you bring the risks all together, there's a value of about 1.8 million. So we have a level of reserve that would meet all those risks. You may question whether they all happen at the same time. Over the last 12 months, a significant number of them have all happened within the 12-month period. So I just will make that point. We also have the capital strategy set out with the capital programme. The capital programme is a rolling programme. A lot of the items within the capital programme are in progress, have been approved in previous years. There are, however, some new additions, relatively modest new additions set out in table 17. In terms of probably the biggest one there is obviously the capitalisation order. We need to build that in to the capital programme if we're capitalising the costs. There's also a sum there for new starts, which is unallocated to specific services. It's primarily there to support Invest to Save. I think we're going to really need to think about how we do things differently. We'll need some investment money for that to happen. And if we build that into our base budget going forward, that will help in terms of looking at those individual business cases as and when they occur. Moving on through, you can see the linkages through to the corporate plan, the capital programme itself, which is in more details at the end of that section and also included in the appendix. Treasury management strategy, again, this is set out as an appendix. There's a summary set in the report. As I've said already, there is the need to borrow over the next couple of years. That's clearly set out in this report. And that brings us down to the council tax statutory recommendations and the comparisons for the total council tax band D, including the police. That's all clearly set out for you. I do need to probably draw your attention to section 13, which is the section 151's officers commentary, and then the section 25 of the Local Government Act. I have a statutory duty to comment on the robustness of the estimates and the budget that is being presented, and my view on the level of reserves. You'll see that I think quite a long statement I've made there, picking up where I think the risks are for the authority. Obviously, we're in a difficult financial position, but we have a balanced budget with the use of EFS, which I would recommend that we will need to take on board to deliver a balanced budget. We still will run with the risk around adult social care and actually delivering the savings. And adults is not just something that we've got to address on the island. Adult social care and the ever increasing in demand for adult social care is a national issue as well. Most councils up and down the land are grappling with that as we have an ageing population that requires more and more care. So the government at the moment have to address how they're going to deal with that in the long term. Currently, the only way that they've looked at is by the 2% precept that they've had for a number of years, but a longer term solution will be needed, and we will see and wait how that pans out when it does. As I said, we always run the risk on council tax, and I think it should be borne in mind here that our collection fund deficit on both council tax and business rates is about 2.5% of our total resources. If you're on a larger council on the mainland, it's a fraction of 1%, and really doesn't impact that heavily on your overall bottom line. Over here, unfortunately, due to our small nature, it does. Therefore, that's always going to be a risk going forward. We've already mentioned the risks around some of the other services, and in particular, as part of the fees and charges report, the issues around that we will be running a risk of running the airport, and we have at long last, following the recommendations from the independent review last year, gone to the position where we got full cost recovery with the proposed fees and charges that you approved earlier, but we still run the risk of a significant change downwards in the number of people using the airport or using air travel, and we will have to monitor that very carefully, particularly with the proposed changes that are coming in over the next 2 to 3 years. We still have the issues and the risks around the culture centre, a very, very large project. Okay, it's not as a major impact at the moment. The only issue we have is that it's slightly behind schedule, but again, it is a significant capital project which could give us a financial pressure, so we do have to be wary of those. And I'm just drawing your attention that the budget is built on that and the fact that those risks exist. But as I've said, it really does need a firm savings plan challenge next year. We really do have to deliver the savings plans in adult social care. There may be some difficult decisions as we go through that, and we'll have to take those if we are going to be sustainable going forward. I do need to draw your attention that we have had consultation and engagement on the budget. We had a consultation meeting. Again, the discussion is set out in detail in the report in section 14, but also in the appendix that sets out the various questions and responses that we had at that meeting that we had in advance, and the responses that we read out at the meeting are included in that appendix for completeness. I think I'll leave it there, Chair, for any questions and whether the lead member would like to comment on the budget.
Thank you very much indeed, Russell. Councillor Nixon, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Russell, for the report. We've had numerous member briefings, so I'm not sure how many questions you'll get coming from the floor. And obviously we have had the budget consultation, the public consultation, and I'd just like to go on record now and say thank you to the staff who were involved in making that consultation possible. It's not a good news budget by any means, but it should be noted that we are not the only local authority having to turn to the exceptional funding support. Direction of travel is that the public sector has been hit hard over the last 15-20 years, and hope that direction of travel may change. It is disappointing that the government settlement didn't take into any kind of attention to the fact of our uniqueness, and clearly we're expecting more to come from their settlement and the fairer funding changes than did. It's a risky budget. I know there's mitigation put in place, but it is going to take efforts from all officers, all members, bearing in mind the finance constraints we'll face going forward. But that said, what you've outlined and the savings, and thank you to all the officers involved in identifying savings, means that with effort it should be achievable, and therefore I would like to propose all the 11 recommendations as they are. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Peacock, please.
Yeah, I would second Councillor Nixon's proposals. However, a couple of questions for me. Looking at page 53 of the pack, and that's table 16. I note that adult social care is 20% likelihood, which seems quite high to me, that we won't meet those savings targets. So can I have an assurance from myself, maybe with other members around the table, that we are going to very, very strongly performance manage that department to make sure we don't end up in the same scenarios as we do now, and at least ensure that at a much earlier situation that we know exactly where we are, because to me that's one of the biggest risks. I also see that the airport is quite a chunky figure, but the likelihood is quite low, and I'm just wondering, with the current state of affairs in the world, whether that might change that figure. And the question would be, over the year, I assume that this risk table is reviewed, and such items as, for example, what's going on currently in the Gulf as regrettable it is to everybody concerned, will feed into this risk table in the performance management. I could say my only other comment would be around council tax. I think it's slightly confusing in the report that we compare Band D, and maybe we need to work out a better way perhaps of comparing like for like, because if I was sitting here, it's very easy to look at that graph and just make the assumption, well, let's go to the median of Cornwall. But obviously if we do that, that pushes, we've got, because of the fact that it's Band D, anything above Band D would see a massively significant increase, which actually may not actually produce any more money for us if we move that around too much. So I think maybe for next year, just a little bit more commentary around how we compare, for example, from this authority to maybe our nearest Cornwall in terms of the numbers of properties and etc. If it's not publicly available and it's too much work, then not. But I think it would be useful, because looking at that document as it stands now, when we're right down the bottom of that graph, the question would be, should we be holding a referendum now to raise our council tax? And I know the answer around the table will be no, but I feel duty bound to raise that, looking at those graphs as they are stipulated in this report. That's probably enough for me. I'll shut up for now.
Chief Executive.
Yeah, I'll just make a couple of comments there. In terms of using the Band D, that is the government applied process that everything is rebased using a set of indices to Band D, and that's what's published. So Band D is the one that you can and do compare, and it is adjusted downwards for the various factors in there. But what I would say is that you said about having more details in the report next year on the business on the council tax. I think I will need to look at that and bring you a report much earlier than next budget. I think we'll need to look at that during the year to be in a better position by the time we get to the budget setting next year to have made our minds up what we are going to do with council tax. There is the ability under the exceptional financial support that we could apply to have a different level of council tax cap if we so wished. I'm not suggesting you do, but you can apply there. That means you don't have to have a referendum, and the government then put it into legislation that a council can set a council tax different than the cap. There are a number now that are listed in there. The council tax regulations are getting longer as these exceptions are being added in, and as Stuart pointed out, we're not alone. There's a lot of people with exceptional financial support, either in terms of a direct capitalisation directive, or ability to raise council tax over a period of time by greater than the cap. But yes, we will, I think, need to look at our council tax and the different ways of looking at that, and I think that's part of the discussion we need to have with government, because we do need that factored into the way that they fund us. They need to understand how our council tax works as well on the islands, and the fact that we don't have a town or a parish precept, etc., and how do we factor that in. In terms of the current situation in the Middle East, clearly set out in the report that there's always a risk to geopolitical events. We've seen that over the last 6 or 7 years now, that they happen and incur impact on our expenditure very, very quickly. Interestingly, as prices have risen very quickly on the oil markets yesterday, they've come down equally as quick today, with just literally a single statement overnight. So you can see the volatility in the world economy through, well, let's not beat around the bush, the President of the United States, and what he says has a major impact on everything around the world and the world economy. But yes, we have to bear that in mind, and we have to try and manage that accordingly. In terms of the airport, we don't know whether that will have an impact on the airport or even the shipping at the moment. As I say, prices seem to be coming back down today, and the factor about future reduction in airport numbers is probably a couple, 18 months away at the moment. But we will need, again, I think part of this year's budget is being very, very tight performance managing the adult social care, which I commit that we will bring in that to members on a very regular basis, probably more regularly than the quarterly reporting we do. But I think we do, as I said, just repeating myself, we need to go back and look at council tax during the year. And I think we'll have to think about what the airport is going to be looking like in 2028, for instance.
Thank you. Councillor Sims, please.
Yeah, first thing, if I could ask for next time, could maybe the officer, 151 officer commentary go nearer the beginning, because it's really interesting and it does summarise quite a lot of things. And by the time you get to that point, you're sort of losing the will to live. And some clarification, if there's anybody out there who's managed to get this far, and I congratulate you if you have, the EFS, just to make it perhaps simple for people, it's more akin to an overdraft than a loan, isn't it? In that you only need to draw on it if you want to.
Yeah, it's a loan facility up to a maximum cap, but you only, you don't have to draw all of it if you don't need it. You can't go beyond it, and it's still subject to, the final transaction will be subject to a discussion with the government, and they are part of accepting the letter from the government with the in-principle decision is that they will do a review next year of our financial position as part of that process, which they will be funding, which I think, to be, if I'm trying to be positive, it would give us, I think that could be seen as a positive piece of work, because we have tried our hardest to make government understand that we need extra funding. If we can get an independent person that they commission suggesting the same, I'm not saying they will, but if we can, then I think that can only strengthen our position in any discussions with the government.
So in a way, what you're saying there is the government becomes more invested in our finances because of the okay, that's
yeah. I mean, it's hard to say there's a positive from EFS, but it means that we don't have to go chasing the government to have discussions about our financial position going forward. There is a constant dialogue that now has to continue whilst we're in receipt of.
Well, I mean, that's fair enough. At the moment, we're chasing reduced negatives as opposed to positive something. And the other thing that our council tax rate is quite low, which I think is reasonable because it reflects our very low median income. But over time, year on year, in absolute terms, we're getting less and less and less than every other authority in the country. And then they go 10, 15 years down the line, we're sort of like half or something. Now, I know the way the government applies the settlement is extremely formulaic. There's no subtlety. They take a sledgehammer to it. But does the fact that our council tax is going down in absolute terms year on year, I assume that's not factored into account, so it does not reflect it in our settlement, and that could be one of our root problems. But we can't do anything about it because we're completely restricted in what we can do with council tax. It just seems to be a vicious circle. Am I right in that, more or less?
You are. What I would suggest is that last summer we had a note from MHCLG in a meeting with them in advance of the consultation going out on the fairer funding approach that they were taking. So before they published it, they wanted to have a discussion with us, and they said that bearing in mind our size and some of our characteristics, they were going to include in the proposals that we would have a bespoke settlement for the islands to properly address our, that's our interpretation of having a bespoke settlement, is that it would address our unique characteristics. And I would suggest that any bespoke settlement that does really take on board all our characteristics would have to look at how council tax works on the islands. They haven't done that and didn't do that as part of that process. But I think that, if you had a true bespoke settlement, then it would be properly brought into the equation for us, because we are so different than anybody else on council tax. It's such a a different, proportionally it is so different. So, I would still be pushing very hard, and we will do, that government should factor that into how they then calculate our grant.
Because, I mean, I'm sort of assuming when council tax rates were set, which is back in 1993, they set them here, we had loads less compliance issues then, and it was probably set at a reasonable rate given the demands put on the council by central government. Well, they've just mushroomed massively since then, but we're still stuck with those 1993 rates because they've not reevaluated council tax bands or anything since the onset of this, have they? So, we've just got this historical structural legacy, which is basically a millstone around our necks.
Yeah, there's been no reset of the valuation agenda there at all over that period. However, what I would comment on, and I haven't got the information immediately available, is that at some point, and I can't recall exactly when it was, I think it was in probably the early 2000s, there were a number of councils up and down the country that pretty much en masse increased council tax for a couple of years running by figures somewhere between 15 and 20%. I would probably suggest that the Council of the RSC probably didn't follow on that, probably didn't need to at that point, and but that's where it's probably lost ground, would be my guess, if we went back and did that. Although I don't see there's any real benefit in spending time looking backwards, we need to look forwards.
Thank you. Councillor Mumford, please.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, adult social care. I hope that from now on it will be closely monitored, adult social care. And I'm going to bring children's into that as well, because I know we're still under Ofsted, but a lot of money has been spent on children's as well. To closely keep an eye on the staffing, and maybe we could share a bit more staffing with children's and adults, and to phase out our interim staff as well. I know we've started on that, but I think everything needs to be closely monitored on adult social care. Health Watch. I should be sorry to see it go in its form, but I understand that we have to make savings. Could I just ask, please, that perhaps we could look at it being phased out? It is a statutory requirement at the moment, so if it stays a statutory requirement, that we have something else in place if they don't continue. And just one question about second homes. If someone's got a second home here and they change it to be their primary home, do they have to live in it for a certain length of time?
I don't know the answer to that one off the top of my head. I'd have to go and find out what the exact rules are about what's a primary and a secondary residence. And I think it's something that's probably we need to look at as we go through the next 12 months, how that is actually working through. We introduced it from April 25. I think, as always with these things that you introduce, there's some bumps along the way. We need to learn from those and make sure that we have got good management over the elements that we have control of, because we don't necessarily have total control over all the elements, but the ones that are in our gift, we need to understand better and make sure that we have those being properly managed. I'm not saying they aren't, but I think we need to revisit and make sure that we are managing the bits that we can control. As you know, with council tax, there's always a risk that there are ways of people can challenge and find ways of reducing council tax. We've seen people move across to business rates, particularly when business rates had a significant small business discount. There's sets of rules there which the government have tightened up on over the last couple of years, which I think has seen that loophole stopped. And we probably need to have a look and maybe lobby the government on second homes as well on that. In terms of Health Watch, we can look with at Health Watch and see how we can phase that in and bring a further report back. At the moment, the budget is set on the basis that we use the statutory funding that we get to deliver the statutory service. Topping it up from resources that are allocated for other key statutory services is something that we have to be very careful of when we have a very tight or very tight financial position, and it's something that the government will be looking at in their carrying out their review of our financial position over the next 12 months. I'm sure they'll be looking at areas where, if the government have allocated a fixed sum of money to do something, we've then decided to go over and beyond that for whatever reason. I think there will be challenge back from central government on why we've directed our limited resources in that way when we haven't got enough. When we're saying we haven't got enough resources in total, if we had a comfortable level of resources, then they would see that as a local decision, and you're allowed to make those decisions locally. But to say when we're knocking on the door of government and saying we haven't got enough, there will be a question, but we can look at that. And I think there's some elements there that, with the fact that Health Watch is likely to be removed entirely during the next 12 months, maybe there's something we can just look at and bring a further report back and how we manage that phase out.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor White, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Russell, for the report as well. I think it's clear from the reports, from workshops that we've had, and from the sort of quarterly reports that we've got layers of problems here going back decades, in that we've never been funded to deliver services to the national standard, and that the increasing expectation to deliver services to the national standard hasn't been met with increased funding or an understanding from central government that services are more expensive to deliver per head on Scilly, whether that's due to our remoteness or that the small population doesn't give the economies of scale that larger authorities can enjoy. This bespoke settlement seems to have taken us out of some national funding criteria but continued funding us on the same underfunded scale, with several errors that you've pointed out baked into the government's calculations. No funding for remoteness and accessibility for England's most remote and inaccessible local authority, as their criteria only fit mainland locations, which is farcical, really, when you think about it. The report also highlights, I think, that the council has been underwriting aspects of local life for a long time, which we can no longer afford to do, especially if we're making the case to government for further funding. Although on council tax, with the discussion we've been having today, I think it's worth noting that I believe we have more Band D properties on average than other local authorities, and that with wages being lower here on average, that council tax is a higher proportion of people's incomes. And in terms of what we've discussed previously around discretionary spending, I think it's important to think about what that represents. As I've said to members before, it's the gap between the services and support our community needs and what government funds. And to me, this shows a lack of understanding of the local situation and unique issues caused by our location and situation. And all that being said, I support the recommendations in the report. I'd like to propose a further recommendation that the council issue a communications item to the public from the chair about the funding settlement and budget, with delegated authority to the chief executive and key officers and members, to include councillors Williams, Nixon, due to their areas of responsibility, and myself as the chair of the communications working group.
Thank you very much. Monitoring officer, will you, when we come to the recommendations, will you read that one again so that we can add that in? Or do you want to vote on it separately?
Just so it's in accordance with the scheme of delegation, if I could suggest some wording for Councillor White, see if he's happy with that.
Yeah.
And then if he can get a seconder for that amendment, and we've already got all of the rest of the recommendations proposed and seconded. If they are happy also with the amendment, I think you could vote on all of them
Okay.
together.
Thank you.
It's a matter for you, Chair, if you want to take it first.
Right, in the meantime, I'll have Councillor Sims, please.
Jeff's just really said what I wanted to say to an extent, but John mentioned it earlier on. I mean, the council have been too generous over a number of years, which is fine. I mean, I can understand that. If we could afford it as councillors, that's what we wish to do. Which doesn't actually necessarily make the council any more popular, but certainly when you take away those things that we perhaps shouldn't have been doing, it would make it's not going to go down well, and it will make the council less popular if it's possible. So basically, what I want to say is that it's a needs-must situation. This is what we must do, and I can't say, to say we're stopping a party is ridiculous. That's pushing it too far. But we've got to, we just got to cut everything back to bare bones and deliver what we have to deliver effectively, and which comes into Health Watch really. We have been giving them a fairly generous amount of money for a number of years, but we can no longer do it. And I think we'd like to continue to do it, but we basically can't.
Thank you very much. Councillor Marcus.
Just in terms of the collection fund, can I just get assurance that we're going to be checking second homes and the switching of this stuff as much as we can, please, just to make sure that we're not falling foul of any loopholes or any, I'm sure everyone's doing everything legitimately, but it'll be just good to make sure.
Yeah, as I answered earlier, Councillor, I think we will need to make sure that we ensure the bits that we do have control of, that we are managing those really firmly on the council tax collection going forward. We have done that in the past with everything else in the council tax. We ensure we manage the local council tax support, the reliefs there, and the discounts for single person, etc. We've done a lot of work on those to ensure that they are robustly managed. I think second homes, we need to just make sure that we are on top of that in terms of what we can be, and the empty homes as well, because empty homes are a key part as well, and the premium on those homes that are empty. We need to make sure that we're on the ball on that as well. So yes, we will be doing that, and we'll find a way of putting in some additional monitoring into the quarterly financial reports to give you assurance that we're looking at it.
Thank you. Leah, Monitoring Officer.
I just wanted to add to that. So when we brought to full council the policy in relation to empty homes and second homes premium, I think it was on your recommendation, Councillor Marcus, we did say that we would bring a review of that policy back to full council, and we would be looking to do that in the early part of 26-27 financial year.
Thank you. We need to look at amendment for a further recommendation. Could we have some words for that, please, Leah?
Yep, so just to make sure, Councillor White, that you're happy with this. So that delegated authority be provided to the Section 151 officer to approve a communication to the public on the budget in consultation with the Vice Chair for Council, the Lead Member for Finance, Governance, Risk and Performance and Corporate Services, and Councillor White in his role as Chair of the Communications Board.
Yep, I'm happy with that wording.
Thank you. Could I have a seconder for that? Councillor Marcus, thank you. All those in favour of this recommendation? It's carried. Thank you.
Carry on. So, was there any against or exempt?
Sorry?
Did everyone put their hand up?
Did everyone put their hand up for that
I don't
recommendation?
think so. You did?
Yes.
I think that's
Yeah.
fine for the amendment, Chair.
Yeah.
That will now become part of the
Yes.
substantive, and it's for
Yeah.
the substantive that we need to go to the recorded
you.
vote.
Yeah, I just want to check with Councillor Nixon and Councillor Peacock, who seconded, that you're happy to propose all recommendations, including that amendment.
I am, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Peacock?
I am as well.
Okay, so we have a proposer and a seconder for these recommendations for the budget. As the monitoring officer said, this will be a recorded vote. So I will ask each councillor in turn whether they are for, against or abstaining. So if you're for, then just say for. If you're not for, then say whether you are abstaining or you're voting against, please. So firstly, Councillor Williams, please.
For.
Councillor Sims, please.
For.
Councillor White.
For.
Councillor Mumford.
For.
Councillor Marcus.
For.
Councillor Blackwell.
Abstain.
Councillor Nixon,
4.
Councillor Roger,
4.
Councillor Legg,
4.
Councillor Guy,
4.
Councillor Peacock,
4.
and myself 4. So we have the recommendations passed with one abstention. Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank especially our 151 officer and CEO Russell for the immense amount of work that he has put in to enable us to set a balanced budget. I would also like to thank all of you in the chamber for all the work that you have done over the past few months, and all the meetings that we've had, and all the quandaries and issues that we've had to throw around, and thank you all for your engagement on that. I would also like to mention, so for your benefit and also for those in the community to know that we are not resting on our laurels. We've had a very difficult time setting this budget. We are still holding government to account. As you've heard from the 151 officer, there are a number of inaccuracies and flaws in the settlement that they have calculated for us. And we have questions still into government about that, which we haven't received answers for yet. I'm due to meet the Minister for Local Government next week with the MP, and I will be pushing further that we get the correct settlement that we should be getting, and let's hope that these things start to move after all the work that we have done, and that during the coming year and within this 3-year cycle that we're looking at here, that we actually get the settlement that this community needs for us to be able to move on well and not have to seek much, if any, of this exceptional funding support. So be assured that we are going to remain absolutely focused on ensuring that government give us the correct settlement that Scilly needs. Thank you very much. And on that note, I'll close the meeting. Thank you.